Okay, so today we are going to practice more completing the square. We're going to pause the video here so you can do these two warm-up problems, and then we'll resume so you can check your answers. For number one, the first step is to move the 4 to the other side. And then to complete the square, half of 8 squared is 16. And you have to add that to both sides. So now the whole point of completing the square is that this will factor to x plus 4 squared equals 20. To solve, I'm going to square root both sides. So we get x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 20. But the square root of 20 can be reduced. This is 4 times 5, so that's 2 root 5. And then as a last step, I have to subtract the 4. So my final answer is negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 5. Now for the second one, I have to move the 5 to the other side. Then we're going to do half of 7 squared. That's 49 fourths. I'm going to factor the left. And to add the right, I need a common denominator. So 5 is 20 fourths. So that gives me 69 fourths. Square root both sides. Plus or minus again. And the square root of 69, I'm going to leave. But the square root of 4 is 2. So then I'm going to add 7 halves. So x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 69, all divided by 2. So yesterday we completed the square where our coefficient, where a is 1. Today we're going to do that when a is not 1. Okay, so when we complete the square, when a is not 1, we start the same way. We have to move the 2 to the right side. But then the next step is to factor out the coefficient on x squared. So on this side, the coefficient is 4, so I'm going to factor out the 4. And then to simplify, before I complete the square, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. So now we have x squared minus x equals 1/2. And now we can complete the square just like we did on the warm-up and yesterday. Half of 1 squared to both sides. Factor. 1/2 plus 1/4. Well, 1/2 is really 2 fourths. So that equals 3 fourths. Now we'll square root both sides. X minus 1/2 equals plus or minus root 3 divided by the square root of 4 is 2. And I'm going to add the 1/2 over, so we get 1/2 plus or minus root 3 over 2, which, since they have a common denominator, we can combine. So this is our final answer. Okay, so we're going to try the same thing for number 2 here. first step, we're going to add the 8. And now we have to factor out whatever the coefficient on x squared is. So the 4 gets factored out. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Now we have to complete the square. So half of 6 squared is 9. We factor. Square root both sides. And subtract the 3. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus root 11. Okay, so now you try number 3. We'll pause the video so that you can do that. Okay, so to check your work, the first one has to move. And then I'm going to factor out the 3. Divide by 3 so that I have my x terms isolated. And half of 4 squared to both sides. Factor. When I add this, I need a common denominator. That gives me 11/3. Square root both sides. We can't have a square root or a radical in the denominator. So to fix that, I'm going to multiply by 1, which is root 3 over root 3. So to make this look better, it's the square root of 33 divided by 3. And now, as a last step, I'm going to add 2. Give x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 33 divided by 3. I would like to make this one fraction. I'm going to get a common denominator. So that is 6 plus or minus the square root of 33, all divided by 3. Now, completing the square helps us when we want to write a function in vertex form. So instead of having standard form, I can change this to vertex form by completing the square. So we're going to do number 1 together. Y equals x squared plus 8x plus 2. First step again is to move the 2 to the other side. Now I have to complete the square, so half of 8 squared. So when I simplify, negative 2 plus 16, and then factor the right. And then as the last step, I'm going to move my 14 back to the other side. And now you can tell me the vertex. is at negative 4, negative 14. The axis of symmetry is at x equals negative 4. So instead of using standard form to find the vertex or the axis of symmetry, you can convert it to vertex form and have your information. So let's try number 2, y equals x squared minus 4x plus 10. Remove the 10. Now we have to complete the square. So half of 4 squared. Combine and factor. And then move the 6 to the right-hand side. So the vertex is at 2, 6. And the axis of symmetry is x equals 2. Okay, I want you to try number 3. Pause the video so you can do that. Okay, so for number 3, your first step should be to move the 5 to the right. Then to complete the square, half of negative 2 squared. And we're going to factor and move the 6. So my vertex is at 1, negative 6, and the axis of symmetry is at x equals 1. Okay, so your job now for the rest of class is to work on the extra practice worksheet 5.3, 1 to 26. All of the answers will be on Edline, so you need to check your answers tonight and make sure that you are doing all of these problems correctly.